You know what a duvet is?
Comforter.
It's a blanket. Just a blanket. Now, why do guys like you and I know what a duvet is? Is this essential to our survival in the hunter-gatherer sense of the word? No. What are we then?
You know, consumers.
Right. We are consumers. We are byproducts of a lifestyle obsession. Murder, crime, poverty, these things don't concern me. What concerns me are celebrity magazines, television with 500 channels, some guy's name on my underwear. Rogaine, Viagra, Olestra.
Martha Stewart.
Fuck Martha Stewart. Martha's polishing the brass on the Titanic. It's all going down, man. So fuck off with your sofa units and string green stripe patterns. I say never be complete. I say stop being perfect. I say let's evolve. Let the chips fall where they may. The things you own end up owning you. God damn it, an entire generation pumping gas, waiting tables, slaves with white collars. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need. We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. We're slowly learning that fact. And we're very, very pissed off.
Do you believe in fate, Neil?
No,
Why not?
because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat. blood.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Vitruvian Man podcast. I'm your host, Zach Schenken, and on today's episode, I will be talking about how to unplug from the matrix, curate your information diet, and master the 9th rule of Fight Club. Basically, I'm going to talk about two main subjects, which I'm fairly passionate about and I think can provide a good amount of value to pretty much everyone's life in this information age we live in. And so those two topics are curating your information diet and active versus passive consumption. And I'm going to go in that order because I think that when you execute the, requisite steps, that's what I would recommend you do in that order. First, curate what you're consuming and then make sure that you are consuming it actively as opposed to passively. So to get into the idea, as you saw in that intro, and hopefully it wasn't too extended, I clipped in some movie stuff there because I think they're pretty poignant commentaries, both from the film Fight Club and The Matrix, talking about unplugging from the matrix and, mass media programming and this consumerism idea, especially in the Fight Club, is the consumerism. But on a previous episode of the podcast, I talked about Earl Nightingale referencing a quote that he said, which is the kind of the conclusion of something he wrote, which is The Strangest Secret, this long essay. So in The Strangest Secret, Earl Nightingale concludes that you become what you think about. Essentially, your thoughts eventually become the reality of the thoughts that you have. And so when our minds are cluttered and constantly being fed these stimuli and information from any which source, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, traditional news sites, TV, the internet, articles, the formal education system, people around you, all these different things are bombarding you with information. And all of those things take up space in the front of your mind, and those occupy your thoughts. And if you don't control what you're taking in, and it's just whatever happens to bounce around and go into your mind, then you will become a product of those. You may accidentally be in a place where you're surrounded by good inputs, but that is not always going to be true. And so you may shift and then find, oh, why am I feeling more anxious, depressed? And you don't really know what to point to, but I would say take a look at what you're consuming on a regular basis. That could be a huge cause of some of those things. I know certainly for me, curating what I have continued to take in has made a massive shift for me. It's been the mental equivalent of consistently going to the gym and cleaning up the food. Everyone knows that you are what you eat, but in the same way, you are what you consume in your mind. And so cleaning up your information diet is part of that. And with the idea of you become what you think about, you need to understand that is essentially stating that what you think about and what is being put into you is programming you. We'll use that as a euphemism. It's similar to the matrix idea. And so you're being programmed and transformed by your thoughts. So if you do not curate what is going into you, you're being programmed by somebody else. And that somebody else may or may not have your best interest in mind, and more than likely does not. At best, they are neutral and they just want some form of exchange from you, whether that be money or just your attention and clicks for views, for whatever. But on a more potentially diabolical level, they may want to influence you in some way, positively or negatively, or sway the opinions of the masses. I think about this. It's most easy to point to an example with traditional media, and we think about, right versus left political news. The goal of the news is to garner and maintain your attention. Their prerogative is not to disseminate actual truth, because they are privately held companies. They are not beholden to tell the truth. They're not bound by any sort of Hippocratic oath like a doctor is, or they're not bound by some government thing. Not saying that the government is innocent, but there's not even in writing a place where they have to guarantee that they're giving you the truth. They just are interested in getting your attention in the first place and then keeping it. and they get paid through advertising. So attention equals profit for them. And like, that's their business model and that's their bottom line. So you need to look at, in anything, when someone's trying to produce content, what is the motivation behind it? And more than likely, what are they trying to sell? Because everyone's trying to sell you something. But on a larger level, you know, outside of, okay, maybe I won't buy into whatever they're trying to sell me. That's fine. You can be strong and resistant to the advertising and scroll through Facebook and ignore the ads that come up on the banners. That's fine. Facebook will make their money because they're selling the ads and whatever. But more than that, the actual content of what you're consuming is super, super important. Like I said before, you're literally made up. Your cells are literally constructed by the food that you consume. You break down the nutrients, your cells use it to build themselves, and you are actually a product of what you eat. And so in the same way, you literally become a product of what you consume mentally, because your subconscious is so much more powerful than your conscious mind, and it's constantly working in the background. For the hour you spend more than half your life sleeping, it's doing a lot of work in there. And so if you can make sure that you cue your mind before you go to sleep with statements or goal statements, affirmations, reading, some sort of positive thing, let your mind work on that information, versus the last thing you see before you go to bed is either some sort of terrible news article or just a bunch of TikToks, and then you fell asleep at 2 a.m. and then roll into the next day. Like, that is not going to yield anything positively for you in your life. Consumption of quality material will automatically, an added benefit, not only just to what is internal to you, but as far as your status amongst others, it will automatically increase your status if you consume quality content. Not only because you're becoming a better product of a person based on what you're reading and all that other stuff, but if your conversations are, you know, I was reading this book the other day, I listened to this podcast the other day, or I heard this in the interview I saw the other day, versus, have you seen this TikTok, or I saw this thing on Instagram Reels, or whatever. Like, automatically you're going to be placed, as far as like status amongst conversations, like people are going to view you in a place of like higher intellectualism or whatever. And like, that is a powerful tool to leverage. It's like a free way to gain status in others' eyes. Gamify that how you will. Those who have read 48 Laws of Power kind of know what I'm talking about. Take that as food for thought. But more importantly than, I guess, any of that is how consuming good content changes you internally. I think about the difference between like, everyone has the same time to spend, right? So how you choose to spend it and what you do to fill it, what kind of content you're consuming, is super, super important. So removing things that are completely wasted and just dead air, and then taking not only your time, but your mental like bandwidth and attention, like you are what you become, all this stuff we talked about at the beginning, is super, super important. So as far as like actionable steps that have made a big impact for me, and I encourage you to try to do the same. So first is, and this is going to be a bit of an exercise, so I encourage you to kind of actually sit back, first listen, and then come back to it, and then try to write down the stuff that is like applicable for you. So a huge thing, a benefit that we have with all of our phones right now, whether you have the like widget present on your phone or not, you can go into the settings and you can see screen time. So first, take like an honest and really raw, authentic look at, what am I consuming on a daily and weekly basis, literally stratified by hours. This is raw data. It's not emotional. It's not like, oh, I feel like I spend too much time on Snapchat. Like, you can just look at it and say like, okay, I'm allocating 45 minutes a day to Instagram, 35 minutes a day to Snapchat, 25 minutes to GroupMe, an hour and a half to YouTube, whatever it is. You can kind of piece that together, and then write that down and write that list, sum it up and say, this is how much time I'm putting to my phone and to consumption of media. Now, this isn't going to immediately classify good or bad. It's just going to tell you how much of your time you're spending on consumption. Okay. And ultimately, I think humans were meant to be a creative force rather than a consumptive force. So you eventually want to get to the place where you're a higher percentage of your day is in the phase of creation, whether that's content, writing, art, business, whatever. You want to be putting things out into the world because you have have a unique perspective on the world. So produce and share that unique perspective as opposed to just consuming what other people put out there. But you also become immensely more wise, proficient, and a better version of yourself by consuming quality content, right? Like you can leap years and years of pain by listening to the lessons of others that have done it hundreds of times before you. It's just like paying for a course on X, Y, or Z instead of spending 4 or 5 years like fumbling through whatever it is. Like invest in a course and fast track yourself 5 years ahead of time, or do it for free but take all the pain and the lessons. It's like you're going to pay for it eventually, and what that could be business, that could be life, it could be whatever. But anyway, so now you have your list of total time allocated to each. I think when we look at all of the social media apps, we need to kind of evaluate what they could possibly produce, and then start leveraging tools to win back our time, not only for the physical, like you want to have more time in your day, but also like not just filling your brain with garbage. So the first thing is you can set app time limiters, which is a huge barrier or tool if you're not going to be willing to delete the apps. I'd say off rip, as far as clearing out content and saving yourself time, if you do not produce content on TikTok, delete TikTok. And that's going to be a hard band-aid to rip off because the algorithm is so good and people are so addicted to it. Like I remember I was spending so much time about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, or probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago when I still had the app. And, I looked at my phone time and it was like 1.5 hours a day. I was like, just on TikTok alone. And I was like, oh my God. And so I eventually like ripped the Band-Aid off, deleted the app. And then the next day I was like, kind of like looking with myself. I was like, why do I have so much free time today? Like, did I forget to go to, and this was back in college. I was like, did I forget to go to a class? Did I forget I had something? And then I was like, oh, I literally just got back an hour and a half of free time that like, I don't know that I would have just accumulated and filled with like, oh, some dead time. Let me just pick up my phone and scroll on TikTok. And the algorithm is designed to keep you on there. Not only because they're selling ads, but they just want you to be inundated with content and just passive and like just lie back and take it, as opposed to being a creative force. So I'd say if you aren't producing on TikTok, delete it. It's a hard band-aid to rip off, but it isn't producing value in your life, and you'll get value by filling that, whatever your number is, right? Like maybe you're really disciplined, you only spend 30 minutes on TikTok. I'd be impressed if that was true. But anywhere from 30 minutes to hours and hours of your day that you could allocate, even if you just use 30 of those minutes to read a book, that's 10 pages a day, that's a 300-page book a month. You're moving, right? So it like there's ways that you can reallocate that time in a really, really positive way. So TikTok, it's got to go in my opinion. Now, Snapchat is a fun way to communicate. I would say if you're in the place in your life where you don't really need to, if you can concede that the Snap groups you're in aren't that important and it's just like degenerate college like remnants or high school remnants and like you're ready to move on, that's another one I would either encourage deleting or at least setting a sharp limiter at like 5 or 10 minutes a day. Because most of the stories that people put on Snapchat, including your own, are bullshit. You know that because your story is bullshit. It's just dumb videos you take whenever, right? Like somebody's in the park and it's a video of a squirrel, or somebody's going out and it's like a video of a loud club and it's like 13 seconds, and all that stuff pieces together when you have hundreds and hundreds of people that you're friends with, and all of that time is completely wasted, right? You gain nothing. It's like at most the best thing that could happen is something like somebody puts like a big life event on there, and then you swipe up, you're like, oh my God. But there's other ways to get that information. If there's someone special to you, you probably heard about it from them, hopefully, call or text. If not, maybe you'll see it on Instagram, right? That's a much better platform for like curated content. And we'll get to Instagram in a second. So Snapchat, I think, is another one that could go or stay, but you definitely want to set a hard limit at like 10 or 15 minutes. All right, moving on. I think next would be Instagram. So Instagram is an interesting platform because I think it's important to have a digital identity. and it's becoming more and more important to have a digital identity. I think the people that just don't have social media in like less than 5 years, that'll be a really, really big problem. I think we're going to see like having a digital identifier that like someone could go to some place, whether it's your website or Instagram or whatever, and kind of get a summary of who you are, what the heck you're doing, maybe a little bit about what you're interested in, at a minimum what you look like. So it's important to have that. But there is a ton of like wiggle room to cull and curate what you're consuming. And so there's tools that I literally didn't know about until maybe like 6 months ago that have saved me so much time. So yes, you can set the app limiter. I'd suggest for Instagram, if you're not putting content out, that you don't need more than 30 minutes a day. And I would also suggest try to like mentally batch when you look at it in certain buckets. So either like, I don't encourage you to like bookend your day with it. Like right when you wake up, you should like either consume good content or just get outside and get some sunlight, read, do something positive. Like don't cue your day up with just Instagram bullshit, and then don't put it right before you go to bed. Again, read, do something to wind down. Don't look at your screen. Everybody knows all the stuff associated with that. So don't bookend your day. But if there's a window, like when I am at my lunch break, that's when I'll check my phone. That's a good way to like block off and make sure that there's not all those like passive phone pickups where you're just gonna click around a little bit, and like all those little pieces, those little 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes at a time, those piece up to like the hour and a half, 2 hours that you're wasting a day. So that's one thing. I think generally just like batch the time that you plan to consume it. Maybe your rule is like I only look at my phone when I'm in the bathroom. That sounds stupid, but like you're probably gonna go 1 to 3 times a day if you're like healthy, and that's probably enough time. You piece like 5, 5, and 5 together, or whatever, however long it takes you. And it sounds kind of goofy, but like seriously, that's another good way, because you're not doing really anything else with your hands. You're just sitting there with your thoughts. So like that's a good way to kind of getting that out of the way. So that's one thing. But as far as the actual tools inside of the app that can save you an immense amount of time and not burn any bridges, because like what I thought it would have to be, if accounts were just like posting a bunch of stuff that really isn't that valuable to me, especially if it's people you know, it would be like unfollow, and you don't want to like burn a bridge or like, oh, you don't follow me anymore, anything like that. So what's cool is Instagram has a feature where if you go to somebody's page or to their story, you can mute either their story, their posts, or both. And so this is really important. I'd say start off really, I guess, very liberally with how many people you mute. Just mute, maybe just mute the stories of the people that generally, like the dudes that just repost SportsCenter and the girls that just repost, their bikini picture that they posted, or like a giveaway for makeup. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're sitting there thinking about so many people you follow just do exactly that, or some variation of like the only thing they post on their story is reposts of whatever. If it isn't, I'd say if people aren't actually providing you value, or like you don't gain value from watching their story, just you go to the top right of the screen, press the triple dots, and then you go down to the bottom, you can press mute, and then another menu will pop up, and it'll say mute story, mute story, or mute story and posts. And what's another cool thing is like, worst case scenario, you either incidentally do it, or like somebody starts putting content out and you want to follow them and like actually keep up with what they're posting. It's not a permanent, you can always go back and unmute. Just go to their account, click the following little bubble, and there's like a drop down caret. It'll open up the menu and you can say like unmute posts or whatever. It's another way to go and mute post if you just want to go directly to their page, and like you're hearing me say this and you're like, okay, this one chick, Patricia, like, oh my God, every day she posts like 50 stories and I just have to tap through. Like, you can mute her story and never have to see it. And what it'll do is like the bubble, all the circles that are across the top of the screen, it'll just go dark and push it out of the way so you don't actually get presented with it. But if you actually manually want to go scroll to it, like, yo, did you see Patricia's story today? Like, so you're not actually losing out on the ability to get what you think you're going to lose by muting. Like, the immediate gut reaction is like, well, what if they post something I want to see? It's still there. You're not losing it. You can always go to their account and see it. You can manually get to it, but it's removing the like passive, just like scroll, tap all day. And like, I've gotten to the point where if it's not like a content creator or some like business person I'm aspiring to, or somebody who's putting out content that is like enriching to my life, like I'm a big quote guy. So like if it's a quote page or whatever, like that's the stuff that is in my feed. The only thing I actually see in my feed are like really, really close people. And this is like for stories, it's like only like really, really close people or people that are producing quality content. Everybody else has been muted. So if you're listening to this and you know me, there's a good chance your stories be muted. Sorry. I hope you don't take it personally, because I wouldn't take it personally if you don't like the stuff that I'm putting out. Because it's your life to live, just like it's my life to live. And if somebody if you don't want to give them that time and own that time or sell your time to them, then don't. And it's not like an ego thing. There's no notification. So short of me coming on a podcast and admitting my muting of other people wouldn't know about it. And I can always go back and change it if somebody's like starts putting out really quality content. Like, hey man, I started a podcast. Have you seen all the stuff I've been putting on my story? I'd be like, actually, and I haven't, but I'll go check. And like, then I can unmute it and be like, sweet. And I also have muted a bunch of people's posts, but I think like the people that I want to stay up to date with their life that post a little less frequently, that's another one. And then as far as like accounts that you follow that post a ton of content, like a Sports Center or a House of Highlights, like for any of the sports fans that are out there, male or female, try to cull it down to a single account. Like that was something I tried to do early in college, and it helped a little bit. And because now like ESPN is this like parent company that owns Sports Center and House of Highlights. They own everybody, but they all post either like it's kind of different shades of the exact same content. And so I don't need to see like the LeBron dunk from 3 different angles and then somebody's phone camera from the sideline bench seats just to know that LeBron and the Cavs beat, or LeBron and the Lakers beat so-and-so, whatever. Like if you want to stay up to date on sports, I think the best way to do that is just scroll the ESPN app like once a day and be like, okay, this is the big thing that happened. But if you want to keep it in your Instagram feed, mute their story, because that's just reposting a bunch of bullshit that they're posting in their feed. That'll save you time. Get it down to one account, and whichever one you like, okay, I like House of Highlights because their icons are cooler, or ESPN or Sports Center or whatever. Or maybe you're just like a single sports fan, and that's where you can win. Like if you just like MMA, just follow ESPN MMA or the UFC account and not the mains. You'll get exactly what you need out of it as far as updates and like the highlights and all that stuff. So those are the big tips, I think, for Instagram. The muting tool is unbelievably powerful. I think just start, like the best way to do it is like, it can kind of be daunting if you're following like close to 1,000 people or over 1,000 people, which is probably going to be around the amount that most people follow. The best way I've found is just every day when people post, try to keep it in the back of your mind when you're going through stories and be like, okay, like, these are all the ones I've seen today. I'm going to mute. And like now that setting's locked, it's like you're going to have less and less per day, and you're going to start to slowly, and like not everyone posts every day. So like you slowly get to the place where you've kind of like narrow. And then eventually you're only seeing exactly what you want. And you've actually, like the word curate, like you've curated what you're consuming. It's not just like, this is my Instagram and this is every person I've met since I was 14 and they're all posting whatever they are, and I haven't talked to so-and-so in 5 years, but I know now that she was at an ice cream store today. Like that is meaningless to you. It is meaningless to you. They're not going to be offended by the views unless they're an actual psychopath, like scrolling the like views on their story. I don't know. It's great. And like a side benefit is if you have a bad relationship with, or even just like you're having a hard time getting over somebody that you used to be in a relationship and you don't want to unfollow them because of like the implications, this is a great way to just mute them and get them completely out of sight, out of mind, move on. They'll never be the wiser. But yeah, generally it's less about like the toxic relationship aspect and much more about the like, I have up and until this point completely just been passive in my social media consumption, and you're now taking an active step to go in and say like, what the hell am I consuming? Why am I consuming it? And how can I be better at like cutting through that? So that is Instagram. That was a bit of a tirade, a bit of a rant. And then the last major social media that I will talk about, I don't have a Twitter, so I'm not going to really talk about that. I'd say Twitter is unbelievably unhinged at like from my external perspective, and most people are tweeting all kinds of bullshit. Like everyone gets a microphone and they think they have something to share. I recognize the irony that I just bought a microphone and started doing a podcast. So feel free to judge me, but you don't have to listen. And in the same way, if you don't find me valuable, mute me and move on with your life. Here is my gift to you. But for Twitter, I would say follow people and stuff that provide. I think it's like a great platform for business, like stock advice, trading advice, updates on markets. Like it seems like a really good 80-20 way to get an idea of what's going on in the world pretty quickly. So follow a select amount, like make sure you're only following a very little amount, and then try to use the app limiter to spend as little time on there as possible. Figure out what that number is for you and continue to move on. And then the last is YouTube. YouTube can be a super powerful force for good or a complete time suck. Everyone knows about the YouTube black hole. Everyone's been lying in bed like, wow, that video about, like, I've watched a dude like in his underwear like make a primitive shelter, and then you watch that like loophole or black hole for freaking 4 hours, and you're like, what have I done with the last 30 minutes of my life? And am I going to move to Australia and start like bushwhacking with this guy? And there's 1,000,001 YouTube loopholes, and like just like any of these apps, they're trying to keep your attention for paid advertising. So the algorithm is trying to figure out what the heck you're interested in. It's going to throw, hey, suggested. And short of being like fully incognito mode, not having an account, that's a decent way, I guess. But then you're never going to get any content that's good for you. I think the YouTube suggested has brought a bunch of amazing stuff into my life. It's just important that what you choose to click on is valuable to you. Only search for things when things get recommended to you. Don't just like scroll the Discover page. I don't even know if they really have one. And then also I'd say, like, if you've accumulated over years a really fat list of subscriptions, it's time to go to the subscription list and channel by channel be like, do I still need to be subscribed to whoever it is? Like if you've had a YouTube account since you were 13 and you're still subscribed to somebody who does video game playthroughs or makeup unboxings, like maybe it's time as an adult to step away from that and not like let that be sitting in your suggested videos. And then when you're kind of like bullshitting around or like at the end of your day, you're just like, I wonder what they're up to. And then you're in the YouTube black hole. And like, guess what? 2 or 3 hours of your life is gone forever and you'll never have those back. And that, like, it's just gone. And that is like more common than anyone would like to admit, but everyone's fell victim to it. No one's above it. It's just about creating barriers to protect yourself from it. So YouTube is a big one. It's great for learning. Video podcasts are awesome. Just make sure that you're subscribed to channels that are providing value to your life, and the ones you're not, unsubscribe, and then try your best to avoid the black hole. My suggestion is only go to your subscription tab, and then once you've cleared the videos that are there, exit the app. That'll hopefully insulate you from being sucked down the rabbit hole. If not, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that the rabbit hole that you're on is full of valuable content. You don't need to beat yourself up if you get trapped in it, but these are all tools that hopefully over a long enough time horizon, you're saving. If you're piecing together a couple minutes over the course of a day, it's an hour or a couple hours. Over the course of a week, it's tens of hours. Over the course of a year, it's hundreds of hours. And over the course of your life, it's literally potentially years of your life that you're getting back. You're literally just winning back to this passive consumption vortex. Because we live in it, like I said, we're in this information age that's not going away. It's only becoming more prevalent. Soon enough, we're going to have freaking chips in our brain and it's all going to be directly connected. So it's here to stay. We have to figure out how to navigate it properly and not waste our own time. These are some of the things that have helped me. So I think that is the end of the curation portion of this episode. I encourage you to go back and try to implement some of the things that I've suggested. They're all really, really easy to try. None of these are like high effort or upfront, whatever. And you can slowly get to a better place. Like start with setting limiters on your phone. That's an immediate barrier. You open the app, it's like you've exceeded your time limit. Yes, you can click ignore and it's only one more tap away, but that one more tap is something that like hopefully will set a barrier like, oh, I don't need to pick this up right now. Like it's not that immediate dopamine spike when you pick the phone up. Set the time limiters, delete TikTok. That's kind of like my number one thing is just delete TikTok. It's not providing you value. And unless you're running a small business or producing content on it, just delete it. It's like, it's going to be tough to swallow that pill. I get it, because it's a lot of fun. It's very, very entertaining, but it's too entertaining, and you know it, and you're wasting too much time. So delete it. And then, yeah, get more into the granularity stuff. Check out the mute feature on Instagram. It's really powerful. And you'll be surprised at how much time you can win back just by the stories alone. Cause like, I don't know how other people are, but I was always like, I needed to clear my stories by the end of the day. And so I'd have to tap through like just the inundation of random garbage in people's lives that they're putting up. So yeah, that's the end of the curation portion. I think now we can step into active versus passive consumption. So we've gotten it through. We've cleaned up our diet. The pantry is empty of all the fucking Oreos and all the bad stuff. Now we only have good quality content to consume. But we still don't want to fall into the place where it may be a podcast, but we're just passively consuming it, meaning we just turn it on and we're not actually taking anything away. It's mostly just noise. We run it in the background, whatever. We watch a movie, even if you're watching like a curated list of movies or like a recommended list of movies before you die, whatever. It's important that whatever you're consuming, and even books, right? Like just reading the book, unfortunately, isn't the most that you can get out of it. Reading is great for the mind. It's like mentally stimulating. You're going to pick up a lot of stuff, like the subconscious got to do a lot of work, but you can get the most out of a book if you're being active when you read. And so a few things to be active when you read: take notes, highlights, dog ears, write summaries when you get to the ends of chapters or books, go back to them. There's a lot of different ways. I see there's a really good video by, if you just go to Tim Ferriss YouTube, he talks about how he annotates when he reads and creates kind of like a legend at the beginning of the book, so that when he goes back to it, it's like page whatever was that cool quote that I wanted, or page. And that's like a pretty powerful tool. He's a famous author if you don't know who he is. And so his video is really good, but there's 1,000,001 techniques. My suggestion is that you just start playing around with them. Use an erasable pencil if you feel like offending the book. Writing in a book is offensive or whatever. Use an erasable pencil, or you can just use sticky notes. There's a lot of different ways to interact with books if you have the physical version. If you're a Kindle user, there's a lot of cool features because you can like store stuff and highlight and screenshot and copy and paste. So that's a pretty powerful tool too. So even when you're just reading, you know, you've picked all these things that you want to read. You now have this list that's going to enrich your life. It's only as valuable as the information that you take from it and then apply to your life. So you need to make sure that you're active when you're consuming. And that's a big, those are the big notes for reading, is like actually take notes, think about it. What I like to do is, because I feel like taking notes while I'm doing the first read through of anything is, it kind of takes me out of the pacing and like the flow of the story or whatever's going on. So if I have a section or a page or a chapter that's like particularly intriguing, or I know I want to come back to, I just dog ear it. So get through the whole book, a lot of little folds, put the book away, maybe even start reading the next book, but eventually circle back a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later to that first book, and then only hit on the parts that I marked. And now you're reinforcing by rereading those sections, whatever it is in your mind. And you can also take out of those and like write down separately, whether it's a digital note or a physical note, the things that you want to take from it. And it's not always going to be, you know, not every book's going to have the same amount of return. Some books are going to be super technical, so you're going to be writing a lot of notes. Other times it's a fiction story, and you're just trying to find maybe good quotes that you can help and carry through life, or how you identify yourself in the story. And that's a good transition into thinking about movies, like how do you consume movies actively, right? Because you're just going to sit there and watch them. And movies can be a good way to unwind. But I do think that like the movies I clipped at the beginning, they have broader meanings and broader applications to your life. So you need to think about those, or I encourage you to think about those, because that's when content consumption begins to actually enrich your life. When you're thinking about the things that you're consuming, both during and after. And so when you're watching a movie and it's a story, try to find yourself in one of the characters. Try to find people you know in some of the other characters. How are they navigating their relationships? You know, in a lot of conversations I'll have, or even on the podcast, it'll be like, I can reference things that I watched and and like experiences that characters went through. And I think that's why, good fiction is good fiction, because we find ourselves in those characters. But a lot of the time it's just like, everybody defaults to like, I'm the hero, because like they generally wrote it for like a hero to be. But look around for the different aspects and flaws. Like really good quality media is written by people, and they're trying to write the most human character that they can. So look for the flaws, look for the things that are, analogous or parallel to your life, and try to take things away from it. A good practice, I think, is when you finish a movie, instead of like going to bed, if you watched it with other people, take some time and be like, what did you guys think about that? Like, what was your favorite scene? What did you think about so-and-so's motives? Like, do you think that there's going to be a sequel? Like, just have like an engaging conversation. One, it's like going to enrich in your relationships. It's going to be a fun way to consume and have that shared experience, but also it lets you work over in your head like what you just consumed, and hopefully take a lot more from it than just like, oh, that was a fun movie we saw. Yeah, I saw that last weekend. Like, no real notes or thoughts on it. Just, I saw it. Like, okay, cool. You're basically just admitting that like that 2-hour window of your life was like just less valuable than some of the other ones, and you just threw it away to just watching a movie. And not every, like, I guess some amount people could be sitting and listening to this podcast and being like, does every second of every day have to be optimized? Like, what do you think about like being just sitting back and relaxing? And it, like, yeah, obviously you can take breaks. Life doesn't have to be taken too seriously. But I also think that most people don't take life serious enough, and also they're just completely floating and letting like life happen to them. This is about like gripping life and deciding like, I'm going to take it for what it's worth. I'm actually going to choose what I put into my brain, so that it's not just what is being put in there. And like, if my brain is programmable, I want to be that programmer. Like, if my life's a story, I'm holding the pen. I'm not going to let somebody else tell that story, and I'm not going to let somebody else tell me who the fuck to be. I think back to like my entire upbringing. Like, I was hyper aware of the news, because my dad was like a big consumer of news, like the news, the traditional media news, on TV, whatever. We don't have to get political, but like, it was politically affiliated. I was always hearing about the world, up-to-date news, like literally every day. It was like a conversation at dinner, and I became so like just inundated and sick of it that like the pendulum swung. And when I got to college, it was like a breath of fresh air, because I didn't hear anything that was going on. And it's you don't have to put your head in the sand and be ignorant to the events of the world. I think that's important. But if you actually look at it, you have no control over what happens in the world at all. So it doesn't particularly behoove you to know that like there was a bombing in Syria, or there was some sort of like random murder down the street from you, or whatever. Like, and as I'm saying this out loud, people are gonna be like, you don't want to be aware of what's going on. Like, don't those things like eventually affect you? It's like, I would argue like since getting to college and pretty much not being aware of the news, like actively consuming it and like seeking it out, my life has only gotten better, because there's no like constant inflow of this negative, toxic news cycle. Again, the news wants your attention. What captures attention really well and holds it? Tragedy, very like toxic engagement stuff. I mean, you can look at any political election cycle. It's all slander from both sides. Like, you don't have to pick the side right now, but like, they're both talking shit about each other. They're both clipping each other in really bad ways. And it's just this like shit fest, and it's toxic for like multiple months until somebody eventually gets to win and whatever. And then we wait for 4 years, and then it happens again. But if you just unplug from that, like, the important news will reach you one way or the other, probably through somebody else who's more plugged in, and you don't have to like spend your mental and emotional energy digesting it constantly. Like, if your job revolves around world markets, yeah, you should probably be plugged into larger world events. That, I'm not saying just put your head in like plug your ears and be like, no, nothing's going on. But if you're just a regular everyday person, like, your job will still exist regardless of the world events. And like hearing about tragedy all the time is only going to wear on your psyche and make you lose faith in humanity and the spirit of life. It's not going to provide you any value. It's only going to detract. The big events will get to you, right? Like there's no way you're going to walk around and not hear about Roe v. Wade being overturned, or the Capitol getting stormed, or who won the fucking election, right? Like the big stuff is going to get to you, and then you can go and be like, oh, I'm actually curious about that. Let me actively seek out information from sources that I know are like at least a little bit unbiased, maybe shoot down the middle, check both sides of the page, hopefully. But the point is, like, instead of just turning it on and just being flooded with what they want to send you, turn it off. Let the information get to you when it's important. These larger issues, like somebody will present like, hey, what did you think about what? It's an okay answer to say, I haven't seen that. Let me check that out. Do you have any suggestions for an article I could read? That is a perfectly good response. It doesn't make you don't just turn into an uninformed person, but you definitely turn into a less anxious, depressed, sad, and distracted generally person if you just get the mainstream news cycle out of your life. And it's been really helpful for me. It's made my life way better. And I don't feel like I'm totally like tapped out of what's going on, but I also don't think that I need to be super plugged in, because my input is only worth a tiny, tiny drop in the bucket. And unless I pursue a career in politics, I'm not going to swing any sort of major political life. Like all you have to control is yourself and your life. I think and that is hard enough. That is a pretty tough task. I would suggest focusing almost all of your time and attention and energy on that and getting yourself to 100%, and then worrying about what the hell is going on around you. You'll have more to provide to that conversation and problem. You'll be a better product to put out there. And two, you won't be completely exhausted and emotionally drained from just taking it for years and years and years. Yeah, so I think that is most of what I had to talk about today. Certainly got a little bit ranty, but it's something I'm super, super passionate about. And it's something that I think almost nobody thinks about, which is really, I guess, surprising to me, because it's such a huge percentage of your life. And like my encouragement is to go back, like as soon as you click off of this or whatever, or stop listening, go and check how much time you're spending on the apps. Like at a minimum, you don't have to change anything, but just go look. Like that number should and probably will surprise you. And then you can be like, man, did my screen time need to be 5 hours and 45 minutes today? And if you're not producing content, the answer definitively is no. And then it's like, how do we get that number to be lower so that I can be more present in my life? There's a lot of great content out there to be consumed. I hope that you find that what I'm putting out is good. If you've made it this far, I guess you do. And thank you. The support has been amazing. This is episode 9. We're almost at double digits, which is honestly mind-blowing. It's been like a whirlwind of just like produce, upload, produce, upload, produce, upload. So taking a step back, it's pretty surreal to get to almost to double-digit episodes. And you know, there's no real end in sight. I hope I can continue with this consistency. I think the consistency will yield positive in the long term. So I'm continuing to push for good content, provide value where I think it can be valuable. And for those that are listening and find it valuable, thank you so much. Looking forward to what is to come. But take a look at what you're consuming and try to cull some of that stuff out, right? Like if you're a healthy person, but you've never really thought about this stuff, use the analogy of food. Like you wouldn't just let pints of ice cream sit in your fridge because it's tempting. Like even the strongest of wills are just like, man, that looks pretty good. Like the easiest way to avoid eating bad food is don't bring it in the house. Everybody knows that. So the same way, the easiest way to avoid either consuming passive bullshit or really, really toxic news stuff is don't let it into your space. And your space extends past your body and into your phone and into your digital presence. So don't follow people that don't provide value to you. Don't consume and watch news that is not neutral and positive. And just take ownership of what you consume, because you are what you consistently think. You become what you think about. And you think about what you're consuming. So don't consume stuff that isn't exactly where you want to be. Like if you want to be a millionaire, listen to millionaires. If you want to be a D1 athlete, listen to D1 athletes and coaches. So I will step off the soapbox for this week. Thank you for listening. It's been a fun one for me, and one that I think I've been wanting to share for a little bit now. So if you've been enjoying the podcast, I encourage you to share with people that you think it could find value from it. I think I haven't done that call to action yet. So this week, if you like this podcast, I'm going to ask you to share it with one friend that you think you might find some value from it. Just shoot them like a Spotify link, an Apple Podcast link, the YouTube video link, whatever. Send it their way. Send whichever episode you've enjoyed the most, and maybe they can find some value from it. And then obviously you can follow me at ZDSDHENKEN on Instagram, and you can follow at Vitruvian Gentleman to follow the podcast as well as the program that I'm working on. Still continuing to fill that first class. So if you're a man listening to this and you want to take control of your life, take a step towards mastering yourself, and also have a community of men to do it alongside, and you're curious or interested, follow myself or the Vitruvian Gentleman Instagram, links in bio to book a call, or you can just DM me and we can have that start that conversation there. You can figure out a little more stuff that you're curious about, but still looking to fill that class. Spots are slowly starting to fill up, so we're capping it at 15. So excited to get some more guys in there. And if you're listening and this stuff is interesting to you, well, I would say I'd love to talk more about it. And so reach out. I'm happy to do so. And I think that's it. Remember, your time is your most valuable resource. So thank you for spending a little bit of it with me this week. Memento Mori, and I will catch you on next week's episode of the Vitruvian Man podcast.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.